Friends, hey, welcome to another episode of Facilitating Change. I'm your host, Mentor Dida. And friends, today I have the pleasure of having a guest like Daniela Papi-Thornton. If you all don't know who she is, I initially got to know about her during my days at Ashoka. She is an Ashoka fellow, total rock star social entrepreneur, and she is one of those people that really embodies the wisdom of system change. When we talk about system change, it is a topic that is complex, a topic that is misunderstood, and sometimes has been just oversimplified in so many different ways. In this conversation with Daniela, we're diving deep into how do we create space for system change to happen? What role does our inner nature, so our inner capacities, how we show up, plays in the system? And how can we really create this balance of creating change in the system and creating change inside of us, right? Daniela is an incredible person. You can read so much more about her in the bio, but she is a total rock star. And recently she even launched this community that I'm a part of called the System Change Education, or the Education of System Change. So it's pretty much all the people that are trying to create change in the system, people that are trying to teach system change, all of us coming together and seeing how we can show up for these times in the world in a way that honors the complexity, that honors the inner nature of humans, but also honors this relational dynamic between all of us. So with that, friends, thank you so much for joining. I'll let you enjoy the conversation, and please don't forget to rate us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, give us a like, a share, and let us know if you have any thoughts or comments. We're always grateful that you're in this journey with us. Daniela, welcome. So excited to chat with you today.
Thank you for having me, Mentor.
Hey, friends. So let's dive into the deep end here. You know, during the industrial age, we decided as society that everybody really needed to learn to read and write because we wanted an education system that produces a workforce for factories. This is pretty much a linear model that creates some sort of repetition of skills and compliance. That made sense at the time, and I'm curious, does that hold today? And what do you see as the purpose of education in this moment in history?
Thank you. Beautiful question. I think at the time we were trying to teach people to read and write, but we were also trying to have the state be responsible for education, allowing the parents to go off and be those workers, right? And then having the state standardize how people could learn so that they could be better workers in the future, right? And what you're speaking to there is that every system we have has a purpose, even though it might not be the purpose that we think it is, right? And that it's perfectly designed to get whatever results it's getting, right? So in these times right now, if you're in a space or in a place where the education system is, failing the kids, right? If they're not reaching whatever standards the government or that location has set, or you think it's failing the kids because you think it's not like the standards are off. You think like, oh, the emotional intelligence isn't being fostered, or leadership outside of facts, like internal work isn't being fostered, whatever it is. It's like remembering, okay, this system is perfectly designed to get whatever result it's getting, right? We are in a time right now, I think, of great systems change, right? We're in a time of great systems change. And so as someone who cares about systems, I think one of the key things I think the role of education could play isn't designed currently to play, but there are nodes within it of people who are saying, let's shift this, right? Because you can't just change the results. Oftentimes we look at the result, we're saying, oh, fourth grade math, such bad, it's like we're not achieving the levels, or my gosh, the education system isn't providing social emotional learning, whatever it is that you care about. We can't just focus on this because it's like trying to put a bandage over a wound with a knife in it, right? The knife is still here. This is the system designed to create that result. right? So our job, if we don't like that result, is to look at the system and be like, what is happening in this system that is perfectly designed to get that result? And it's not like we could sit there and analyze it and then figure out the right answer. We can't do that. If we did, we would have already done it, right? You can figure out the right answer when you lose a phone. That's a problem to be solved. This is not a problem to be solved. We can't solve a system. We can't solve a symptom. These are symptoms of problems. So right now, to me, the biggest thing education could be doing is to teach people how to do that. Stop trying to solve symptoms. Look at the system without blame. We're in this huge polarity of it's everyone else's fault on the other side of whatever side we're on, no matter what the issue is. Instead of us looking at the system and saying, wow, no one sat there and intentionally designed this whole thing. People design little pieces, but this is where we're at, and it's producing these results. I'm no longer going to put a bandage on this wound, and I'm no longer going to blame the other side, whoever they are, for this. And I'm going to start looking at the skills of what are the skills to contribute to shifting a system. AI is taking over the facts. We need to be able to discern what facts are, but we don't have to memorize the year that the Civil War started. It's at our fingertips, right? But we do need to learn how to lead in complexity, how to see complexity. And because we're in a time of complexity right now, those who don't have those skills are in absolute fear and stuck and still trying to put bandages on the knife.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'm curious, Daniela, just to understand this better. When you're saying the system is perfectly designed, right? Is it intentionally and purposefully designed? Like, for instance, one of the things that comes to my mind, you mentioned social emotional learning, or even attention in classrooms or well-being in classrooms. And I do feel like it was designed maybe to get people to get jobs, but not designed to have students really struggle to pay attention, or the whole thing is purposefully designed. So what is when you say it's perfectly designed, what do you mean? Can you explain that a little bit?
So Dave Snowden is someone who teaches complexity, and he has a Cynefin model that people who teach systems and complexity probably would have seen. And I like his quote that I'm going to not get exactly right, but it's something to the fact of, in complexity, the only thing that is guaranteed is that there will be unintended consequences. That's the that you couldn't predict, unpredictable consequences, right? That is the only guarantee, right? So I think about this example. When I lived in Cambodia, I ran an education and youth leadership organization in Cambodia a long time ago. And one of our team members, Riti, who's an incredible human, we'd visited a bunch of homestay communities around the country, right? And he was like, I want to bring a homestay program to my community, right? He's like, this would be great, and we could bring money and did it. So he went and he did research, and what he found was, complex unintended consequences, right? So he's trying to figure out, okay, how do I avoid this kind of polarity? How do I avoid this where only the rich are getting to benefit? He's making this whole plan. He comes up with this great plan, and he has meetings with his community. And at some point he realizes, he's like, I could design the best system in the world, but once I release this out, there is no control anymore. I don't have control, because this is a complex social environmental system, right? And he knew, he basically eventually was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do other things in my community. But he knew that unleashing this, in that no matter how perfect he planned it, you can't plan a complex social environmental system, right? You can make contributions, and you can, try and, Dave Snowden's words would, I think he would talk about probing. You can probe the system, you could try something out, you could see what happens, and you can shift and you could try something else out, right? So no, these are not some people designed the system and it's perfectly evilly designed by, two puppeteers, right? It's probably designed by lots of people with really great intentions, right? The people who made the apps. Okay, well, we're trying to make, we're trying to make more money on it, or we think it's a really good program because, gosh, things like Facebook and Instagram, it connects people like us together and get to find each other. And it reduces our attention span, right? No one went out to try and reduce the world's attention span, right? But that is what's happened, right? Okay, our attention spans are reduced. Where do we want to probe? Do we want to work on having every child have meditation skills? Do we want to work on regulation of technology that might or might not just get worked around? Do we want to, there's no right answer here, right? But there's a way to look at it without it's blame. It's they did it and they're doing this to us. No, it's complexity. And that's what complexity is. It's complex, right? The benefit is there's no one right answer. What that means is that every single one of us can find a way using our unique skills to contribute to shifting the systems that we care about. Every single one of us. Doesn't have to be a lifelong, doesn't have to be like, I'm starting this thing and I'm going to spend the next 20 years of my life. No, we can all make small shifts, and some people can make big contributions over 20 years around their life. And the negative thing, the positive thing, there's no one right answer. We can all contribute. The negative thing, there's no one right answer, and you can't fix it. There's no one right answer. So why I care about complexity and systems education in schools is because linearity, this mentality of, well, there's a goal. I set the goal like a mountain in the distance and it's really far away, but ooh, I'm going to get there, right? And I'm going to learn to be more efficient, and I'm going to learn to be faster, and I'm going to learn more skills. And wow, I'm getting a little bit closer, but it's still really far away, right? And I can lead my life like that, right? And you know where you're going, and you know that the only way to get there is either the pace you're at, faster or slower, right? That's it, right? And that's a lot of how we teach. There's a right answer. There's a right step in the right direction. But in complexity, it's like in the waves, in the oceans, you don't even know. Sometimes you don't know where you're supposed to go, and you need different skills. And especially if we want to get there together, right? We need relationality. We need intuition. We need patience. We need presence. We need to understand complexity. We need to understand that actually we can probe something over here and get one result, and we could do the exact same probe tomorrow and get a different result. And that doesn't mean we did something wrong. It just is complexity. Okay, well, we're going to try something new, right? Nuance, to be able to sit in that uncertainty. We don't teach kids that. We teach kids there's a deadline. You've got 10 minutes. Here's how you fill in the right bubble on your test. There's a right answer or there's a wrong answer, right? We don't tell them to sit in the liminal, in that in between and not know. That is a skill set that you need to have in complex times. Yeah. And we need to foster that, fuel that, teach that.
Amen. Amen. And how did you end up at doing this work? Because it does feel like, you're yourself an educator. Even before this, you're like, is my title educator, system-led leadership? Which feels like, at the heart, you really care about this, how we are equipping the people, the next generation with the right skills, mindset, and heart set. And I'm curious, how did you end up here? I'm very curious to explore.
I just changed my title to mother and educator. Oftentimes when people ask me at some conference, I'm like, just put mother. I'm like, I don't want these silly titles, but how did I end up here? I mean, I think as a mother, it's one of those things where you recognize, especially with two kids, it's like, I could do the same thing, or I think I did the same thing, and my kid's going to come out totally different because I can't control the world, the externality, right? All these things, right? And also it's my internal state. We always think it's what we do, right? And I don't remember who did this quote, but I think it's Peter Senge who loved it. It was someone he was interviewing. It was a CEO of a company in the Midwest, I think. And the quote is, the biggest predictor of outcomes is the internal state of the intervener. Right? So like, we think it's what we do, but like as a parent, you actually learn, most people hopefully eventually learn, it's your internal, it's not actually the action, it's your internal state while you do it. Right? And the same thing happens. I teach systems work, right? And I've taught here in Boulder in this Masters of Environment program, and Masters of Environment students, right? These are like in Boulder, Colorado, right? So it's like the left of the left of the left of the left, right? And they are passionate, right? And they're like, these are the people who are like, oh, I want to change the world. And they are often doing it out of fight, out of anger, right? There's so much, I come from Florida and those people don't get this, or these people who voted over here, they don't understand. I'm so angry, right? There's anger, there's fight. Not that anger and fight, like we're going to have anger, right? Those emotions are going to come up, right? But that internal state of the intervener, if we are going out into the world in fight, what do we get back? Fight. No way we get anything else back. Like, we know this, especially as a mother. It's like you see a kid, if your kid tries to fight you and then you're like, how dare you hit me? Like, what are you going to get? It's like an escalation. And actually that's what they're wanting. They're wanting the attention. But if you can give it in a different way, you can get better results, right? Same thing in polarity. If the other side, whatever it is, comes at you and is like, hits you with a banana like your 4-year-old, right? And then you throw back, a smoothie, right? Like you're like destroyed your whole kitchen, right? Because you thought you needed to be in fight, right? And that's where we are in the world. So how did I get here? My mom was an educator. My mom was a first grade teacher for 37 years. My grandmother, who I never met, who was dead before I was born, was an educator. Like, I come from this line of educators. I swore I would never be a teacher. I was like, these people did this. I'm not doing that. They don't make a lot of money. They don't do this, whatever. Just whatever views I had. My uncle was an engineer. I was like, I'm going to be an engineer. I went to school for engineering. I was like, I am not going to be an engineer. I started 1 year. And so I didn't intend to be here. But I taught English in Japan. And I'm like, I was good at educating. And so it was like I wanted to travel the world. And that's how I did it. Ended up in Cambodia, ran a education and youth leadership organization for 6 years in Cambodia, celebrating its 20th anniversary this year. And I always say, I am not proud that I started it. I had no right to start it. I knew nothing about education in my own country, let alone Cambodia. I didn't ask questions. I came in like righteous, like, I am from a wealthy country and my job is to bestow my benevolence on the people of Cambodia. Right here, I'm going to raise money and build schools. Like, I knew nothing, right? And I had a mentor there who passed away, Mickey Sampson, and through him, I learned that you have to earn your right to bestow your benevolence because you can cause more harm than good. And I saw through my own work and through a lot of other people's work over the years of watching, good intentions are not enough, right? That Ivan Illich speech is a great thing to listen to sometime or read. Good intentions are not enough, right? So that's where I came to this work. I came to this work having great intentions, making a ton of mistakes, shifting, learning, now being really proud that this organization exists. Not that I started it, but that it exists and that it's Cambodian run and it is much more systems led. It has an amazing team. And then went to Oxford, did my MBA, worked at the School Center for Social Entrepreneurship, got to teach at a lot of other places, got to work with a bunch of other educators and realized, oh my God, we are teaching social entrepreneurship in that same failed mental model that I had going into Cambodia that was like, I'm going to make an app for these rural farmers in a country I have never been to, even though I've never farmed, but I'm getting school credit to save them, right? And we are fueling that. And that was the only accolade. It's the only funding. It was the only pathway for the students who wanted to do good. We weren't teaching them how to understand problems. We didn't have any incentive, support, training models that were how to understand complex systems. We just had these like hackathons, business plan competitions to try and solve them, right? So that's been my work over the last 10 years is how do we integrate system problems understanding into the piece that is important, the innovation change, but it needs to be grounded in a reality of what's happening in the system.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And just to build on that, this idea that how we are is actually more important than what we're doing, and that how we hold this life. And yet, you're also talking about the need for system change thinking, and doing. So how do you hold space for people to have the inner dimension to come together in a way that there's not a bunch of fighting happening there and pointing fingers? No, it's your fault, is the system, it's my fault, is this, is the guy you voted for, or whatever. So how do you create the necessary space for people to find that dimension inside of themselves, so that they can show up in a way that is productive, or even a better word, generative, for doing the system change work? I'm curious, what have you found that works in this type of facilitation?
Right. Okay, so one thing is that it's a fractal, right? It's like one of the concepts of systems is fractals, right? Like you can look at like the education system of your little classroom, right? You can look at your university or your institution or your school, whatever you're in. You can look at the wider education system of your state. You can look, right? You can look at the fractals, but those fractals are also inside of us, right? There's people who are like, wherever they are, like, we have a narcissistic leadership, and I'm like, and we're a narcissistic society. Right? These are all fractals, right? So we can deal, I call it like bad apple syndrome. We're in a company, we're like, oh, this person, they're so horrible. Fine, maybe we made a wrong hire. Great. Like that person maybe doesn't need to be there. And this system hired this person, celebrated this person for how long, like created the conditions that person could continue to be harmful if they were, for however long they were. And so we think if we just remove them, no, it's not going to change anything in the long run, because someone else will come in and fill that gap if that's what the system is celebrating, honoring, whatever, right? So this concept of fractals, right? So I have had students in the past be like, why are we doing inner work in systems, right? They think the problems are so huge and so urgent and so outside of themselves that there is no time to go inside. Like, we need to fix it. If you go out with fight, if we all collectively go out with fight, we are not fixing anything. Right? Like this concept in this polarity, I'm obviously living in the States, the polarity, swinging two-party contest idea creates this situation where, people are like, oh, we just need to fight harder next time so we can win. To fight harder. Like, oh my goodness, right? This is what we've taught. You will not get anywhere in the long run if you fight harder, right? It's not like that's what we teach, right? So what is it to, in our classrooms, oftentimes, if I'm working in a university, I often have to write a curriculum and like highlight all the systems tools and systems pieces. And look, these are the learning outcomes that they're going to have about how to use these different tools. But that is not really my goal. It's like subversively, like I just build the inner work in as like, because I know that it has to be there. But in some systems, it's not celebrated. They're like, why are we doing this? Right. And so what I care about is like, I want to shift that. I want to make that visible and forefront, right? So you don't have students say, why are we doing inner work? Like, no, this is essential. We have to do it, right? So like, that's like, rather than trying to shift the system by like allowing in a program that is a little more inner work than the curriculum stated, I want to just be in communities with other educators. And there are other educators who are saying, we need to shift this. Let's put this towards the forefront. And that balance, the linearity is there. Sometimes we see the mountain and we need to learn how to be efficient and fast, right? And so we need that skill set too. Is it okay if I share a quick story?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I was on a panel through Mount Royal University, I don't know, sometime in the pandemic, I want to say like 2021, 2020. And another person on the panel was Karen Joseph, co-founder of Reconciliation Canada. And it struck me, what she talked about was, she said, in my culture, there are two types of time. There is linear time, which she would call masculine leadership. This is not about gender. This is about yin and yang. This is about our internal states. We all can do the linearity and the complexity, right? When she would say, there's masculine time, linear time, and you need linear this, what she would call masculine leadership. I think at the time that's the word she used. And then there's circular time. And in circular time, you need circular leadership, right? And if you look at this balance of masculine, feminine, which is an internal job then reflected into the external, the linearity, set the goal on the mountain, move. That is often our education systems. That is our MBA programs. That is how we teach, right? She was saying then, and I feel like there's no argument now, we are in circular times. Circular times are when things can really change. In linear time, you can just go faster. There's no, right? In circular time, you can make these huge jumps in how the world works because we're not going in a line anymore, right? Therefore, we need leadership that knows how to be in the spaciousness, to make those jumps, to make those shifts, to no longer say like that we're going to use this same mental model. Okay. And for the people who this feels too esoteric and woo-woo, we'll go to Roger Martin, famous business author, written tons of books. One of his more recent books, but I'm sure he's written multiple since then, is called A New Way to Think. And all you need to read is, you could read the whole thing, it's great, but you could just even read just the opening stories, the first chapter. He's not using those same words, but he's talking about, he uses paradigm. I would use mental model. But he's basically saying that oftentimes you have these companies, because he's working in these big companies, and they have a mental model about something, and it's not working. It's actually causing the opposite results, right? And so what they do is they think, gosh, we got to apply our mental model even harder, right? So here's an example of a company that does innovation. They want to do more innovation. And so what they have, the mental model that if we vet these innovations at the start even harder, we're going to get even better results. Oh, shoot, those results aren't innovative. They're just incremental. We need to vet even harder. And then they're just even more just incremental, right? Because the methodology, this idea of vetting is saying, there needs to be proven that this might work. Whereas the real changes that are going to be innovative and huge shift can't have data to prove them, right? So their mental model was wrong and they're trying to do it harder and harder and harder. We are doing that as humanity. We are using these linear mental models and being like, it didn't work. We need to fight harder. No. We need new mental models, right? And so that's why I care about educators, because we're the ones who can teach and share different mental models. And other ways too. It doesn't have to be through education, especially not formal, but yes.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The one thing I encounter, Daniela, and it's so beautiful that this idea of how we view the world is from our mental models, from our paradigms, frameworks. We're understanding the world, and what I find there is some challenge when it comes to even the inner work. It's complex. There is not necessarily just one way. Like, hey, if you're internally this way and you follow these steps, it's all going to be fine, right? And there's many different ways to have people. Some people use religion and say, like, you know what? I am this. I identify with this religion, and this what's informed my paradigms and framework. And I feel like if everybody was like me, would be great. you know. and there is people who are monks who just live in a Himalaya somewhere, and that they have a different framework. And then there's people who are very against anything spiritual, anything religious. They're like, no, there's only matter, nothing else, and you should not force me to tell me what should I believe in or what should I think about my life, because I'm here in this classroom to learn about skills, or maybe as the person who sees that the purpose of education is for you to just impart information, or just to infuse information into yourself. So how to navigate this complexity, that we can all come at least to some sort of shared understanding and shared agreements about our internal dilemma or internal mental models. Like, do we just reach a point that we say, like, all right, from now on we believe this, or how do we arrive at that? I feel like that is such a juicy and complex topic, and if I'm pushing too much here, let me know. But it does feel like it's I'm so curious to understand that more.
We're never going to all have the same mental models, right? Like, we can't. You see the world through the glasses of the life that you've lived, right? These are true. Your view of what's true in the world is uniquely yours, right? These are truths uniquely yours. So that's like, I want to write a paper about that. I thought about that before. Anyway, but that's like, and that doesn't mean we're like in a post-truth world and like, is this matter? And, yes or no? No. But what it means is your view. You have these biases, even though you might have done all this anti-bias training, like, you have them. You can't take your glasses off, right? You have a bias that universities are good or that they're bad. You have a bias that when people use a certain type of vocabulary and how they speak, that is the right way, proper way to speak, or not, right? Like, even if you don't want to have those biases, you have life experiences that give you a bajillion little tiny mental models that form your wider mental models of the world. We cannot all have the same, right? Thank goodness we don't have the same, right? Because that's how we can't innovate, change, grow until we like run up against each other. John Canya's work with Catherine Milligan and others, Catherine and I taught a class together at Dartmouth, and they have a bunch of papers on systems leadership, and they also have a great piece on healing systems and this idea of trauma in the system versus trauma in the individual. There's no trauma in the system. It doesn't exist. The trauma is in us that is also reflected in the system in terms of social systems, right? We can inflict trauma upon the earth, of course. But the trauma of like the migration sector, right, doesn't exist. It exists in the bodies of lots of individuals and their ancestors, and that inherited trauma, right? And the trauma of working in the system and seeing people be traumatized, right? And so their argument is that we can't address the trauma in the system without addressing it in the individuals. When we try to address it in the individuals, we're not in a society that is built anymore. We used to be. Indigenous cultures are built to collectively hold trauma. That it's like there are processes and pathways to collectively heal and collectively hold, right? When there's trauma that has rippled through a system. And we don't have a lot of those practices anymore. So individuals internalize them as this something wrong with me, or I have this mental illness, or I have this thing that is wrong with me, right? And there's nothing, if that is a view that you have about yourself or others, it's not that that's wrong, but what it is as a society, we're missing the holding of that wider thing of like, oh, this isn't just you, honey, right? Of course you have anxious and stressed because, gosh, the whole world just changed around you and you had to be at home for a few years and you didn't, like, and so of course, yes, you are feeling these things and this anxiety and these things. And wow, look, the collective is and how do we hold this together, right? Mm-hmm. But part of that work is saying, actually, if we ask people to deal with the trauma individually, what happens is we don't want to change the system because we're like, ooh, changing that system means I need to deal with this stuff in here, and I'm not ready to do that, right? Because we don't have the systems to do that. So the system doesn't change because we're not willing to do the inner work, right? That connection. They also wrote pieces where I was originally going, I was at the system leadership piece, and they talk about the sacred. So when I have my students, right? So once again, bunch of students from Masters in the Environment, actually a lot of them are the ones that you're talking about who are like, I don't want anything to do with spirituality. I took them on a retreat, and it happened to be in this incredible building here in Boulder called the Star House, and it's built in alignment with the stars. It's like there's 12 pillars, each representing a different astrological sign, right? And so we had someone orient us to the space. It wasn't that we were doing anything with astrology, right? But we did have someone teach us, hey, this is how this building was built and why, you know. And I did have students say, like, why are we in this space? It's like, we don't have to believe or embrace someone else's, views of the world. But to make it wrong, right? That's creating that polarity again. And Catherine Milligan's work, John Kenya, their work around systems, and there's other people too. They're not the only ones, but I'm thinking of this article I have my students read. It talks about the roles of what it takes to lead in systems, and one of it is the sacred. And I really like that terminology because there are lots of views that when we removed our connection to Mother Earth as part of this, like, divine masculine, divine feminine, as like sacred, when we view it as just science, it's this thing and we live on it, we lose that like honoring, right? If we really want to be in connection to this planet, I don't care what, it doesn't need to be through a religion for sure, but there is some sort of human sacred connection to the land that actually, some would argue, and I'm forgetting that there's a woman's name who's written a lot of books on the sacred feminine. She argues that when that was intentionally removed from, the Deuteronomists had the view of God, Yahweh was masculine and feminine, and now we have the Holy Ghost. What's the Holy Ghost, right? This was like originally Mother Earth, right? The sacred feminine. When that was sacred, yeah, we're going to protect the earth because humanity has this sacred connection. And in indigenous cultures, this view of all my relations, not just being humans, right? It's our relationship to the winged ones, our relationship to the four-leggeds, our relationship to the land, to the rocks, to the air, right? That sacredness, that creates the spaciousness of, I am no longer in this just for me, competitive, my life, my family. It's like I have, the view of 7 generations. I have the people in front of me. I have my ancestors behind me. I have a commitment and an honoring to the sacred connection of these other creatures and other energies and life forces. So I think there's not one way forward. There's never going to be one mental model. But if there is nothing sacred, then I don't know how we move forward without more destruction, individuality, competitiveness. Yeah.
It's fascinating. There is this these lessons that you're bringing from the indigenous communities, and I do feel like they had some really fascinating ways to live in harmony with the planet, which was, I think, now it's needed. Many people are learning from permaculture, from indigenous practices to regenerate the earth, but also some of the healing. This term, like some type of trauma healing and things like that. And one place I'm landing, Daniela, and I'm curious how you view this. The system is not traumatized, but we are traumatized. but we are traumatized because there's no system that supports our trauma. It feels like chicken or the egg, right? So where do
the
we
system
start?
doesn't exist. That's the thing.
Hmm.
The system doesn't, we made it up. There's no such thing as the education system. It doesn't exist. It's a mental model itself. Does the education system end where the mental health and healthcare system, or does it include the healthcare system? Okay, sorry, I cut you off. Ask your question, but I just want to clarify that it's not that the system doesn't have the system is a mental model. The view that we even have something called the education system, it doesn't exist. We made it up. This table exists. My shirt exists. Like education system, it doesn't exist. It is totally mental model. And you and I might have different views on where the boundaries are, right? Because it's not a thing that has a form that is agreed upon.
So, because if it's designed right, so let's look at, and I'm just curious to explore this more because this is really interesting. I'm curious if let's say all of us agree that hey, kids should go from kindergarten to 12th grade, and that's mandatory for everybody, right? And then we build schools, we build capacity of teachers to go there to teach these young people to get a job afterwards or to get ready to take the SATs so that they can get to college and then get to college so that they can get a job, right? To me, these are like some shared agreements and structures in place that actually we go through whether we whatever our mindset is, our kid that walks into the society usually goes through K through 12, right? If that's the system, you go through K through 12, and it is not fixed. I'm with you. It's not that, hey, this is it and that's it. Um, and if what informed the current K through 12 is maybe the times back in the day, industrial age, different world, uh, the consequences of it were some of the negative sides that we're seeing, just like you said, the phones causing the distractions. That's also education has these things because sometimes kids get to sit for so long. My goodness, like if we go to a conference, at least we can go outside anytime we want. But if you're a kid, every day you're going to conferences. That's painful. That's punishment. Especially the outdated conferences that just made you sit and listen to people for some time. So this 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 where do we start? And from what I'm hearing, I do feel like we're starting not necessarily by changing the system, but we're starting by changing ourselves. This is where it goes, because sometimes when we say changing ourselves, that means all of us have to change, and I feel like that's actually a fallacy because we need to own it up. We need to face ourselves a little bit, and this individual responsibility for us to be role models, for us to be the change, for us to actually hold the life inside of us lightly, but also hold the different perspectives lightly, have the ability to hold them without latching into everything. uh, is that where this start? If somebody wants to create change in the system, do they start there? I'm curious, where do we start if we want to create this big system change?
We don't start anywhere. It's already happening. You can take a nap and you will wake up and the system will be different, even if you just took a nap, right? So we do not need shared mental models. We can never have shared mental models. We do not need shared agreements on where we're going, but that is a contribution, right? So like, there is no one right place to start. Let's talk about this call we just had. We had a call last week with educators called the State of Systems Change Education, right? We had 100 people sign up for the call. We had like 39, I think, show up. The rest, got the video. But the ones who showed up, we had one of the pieces that was coming through was, and it was one of the questions we asked, we had like a pre-survey email went out, like, what do we even mean by systems change education, right? So there's one kind of linear view that's like, well, we need to come to an agreement on this, right? And I would say one of the most beautiful things that comes out of this is, okay, there's some people that view that systems change education is that they, as educators, are teaching the tools of how to understand systems. Okay, here's how you understand complexity, right? Here's some tools. Like I always, which way do you see it? The Berkana 2 loops model is the tool that I go to all the time right now in these times to say, like, look, one system is dying. Look, a new system is being born in parallel, right? It's not a circle like we say with the seed, and a seed has a plant and the plant comes up and the seed dies. And it's not a circle. The moon is a circle. It comes back. It's the same moon. It's not a circle because it's a new plant once the seed goes down. And actually the other old plant doesn't evaporate and a new plant comes up. The old plant is still decomposing and dying while the new seed is being planted, and then the new seed is born, right? So the same thing in our social environmental systems. You don't like transform from one energy system to another energy system, right? We didn't move from horse and carts to this like half cart, half car situation. And then we have cars, right? It's like we have horse and carts, and then somebody invents a car, and then some rich people can buy cars, and then they find a way to make cars even more accessible, and more people have cars, and then roads get transformed so that they're built better for cars than they are built for horse and carts, right? And then we have, so systems, one is dying, another one's being born. We have people sitting in grief and in anger and sadness about old systems dying. There's roles to play in hospicing and helping these die well and taking the resources into fuel for the new system. But there's other people who've been pushed out or stepped out of this system. This model is called the Berkana 2 loops, right? So they step out, and these people need nourishing, right? Same thing for you. You can pick any one of these roles. There's not one step. We need people in every one of these. Like, we need people to sustain the oil and energy companies enough to be making the solar panels. Like, we can't pretend solar panels and electric cars and all this stuff are made from oil, right? It's there. And that has to exist enough to help this system start. And then eventually, when this system is strong enough and big enough, we can transition these resources over to there, right? Same thing as educator. So people came into this call saying, for me, systems change education means I teach systems change tools, models, things like that. Others might say it means, I could totally agree with this one too, that you're changing the system. Like, you're like building inner work subversively into your class, Daniela, but like, how do you actually change the system so that others now have permission, incentive, to then do that too, right? Others would say systems change education is embodying that more present inner work, led, more intuitive, more interconnected way of being in the classroom, right? We need all of these, right? We need all of these in the same way that we need all of these roles. Not everybody, we can't all, because there's no one way to fix it, right? You cannot solve a symptom. You cannot solve a system. You cannot fix a system. You can contribute to shifting the system that is creating those results that you don't like. You can contribute to shifting. That is a different skill set, different mindset, different approach than solving. Because there's no one right answer, no one right way, we can all contribute. So the question of where do we start? It started without you. If you take a nap, it's still going. There are people that are pushing towards different results than the one you maybe care about. Okay, so what do I do now? If there's results that I care about, okay, there's lots of different roles. One role is to teach about that. Highlight, this is what's happening. This is what we see. Like, we have a program called Map the System, that I started when I was at Oxford that now runs at 50 universities around the world and colleges and other educational institutions, polytechnics. And students who've never looked at an issue, some of them feel like, oh, what can I do? Actually, you telling the story, doing the research, and sharing that learning of here's what's happening, that is a huge contribution.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm. That's
Yeah. And
beautiful. I love that.
I
Just to build on that,
yeah.
that's actually really helpful because so often this idea of system change is where there's this one heropreneur, like there's this one hero, who has an idea of how things go differently, and then they have to fight against the current system so that we go and change this. And what I'm hearing you is that, yeah, maybe that can be one of the roles, but there's way different ways to contribute towards the system. There's something that you can do to educate people. Maybe there's something you can do to actually just just be aware of your own influences and what's influencing you, actually, to think about this new system or the old system. Just kind of examine yourself in this process to make sure that you're not contributing to the extra traumas that are informing the system. So, to be an example yourself, to actually see if you can teach. I love that there can be different types of roles that all can speak to us, and what feels like a common ground is this. And I believe you've used this word to apprentice a little bit with a system, to actually hear its song and try to understand it and see if that song is resonating with you, and if not, maybe share with others why not. If it is, do this. But there's this ability to actually hold the dynamics of it, or is it just like, hey, today I feel like education sucks and I'm going to do something about it? That could also do the trick without you having that a role per se, that I'm going to try to change the system, but just to be active into understanding the system, right? Is that understanding the system, see maybe what's working, what's not working, and keep learning what other systems could there be, dreaming and pushing things forward. Am I understanding this correct?
Beautiful. Yeah. The term, when I interviewed Jessamine Seamus Lau, who used to run the Puri Foundation, when I was writing a report called Tackling Heropreneurship, she used the terminology apprenticing with a problem. And I loved that. And then I created some funding at Oxford called Apprenticing with a Problem funding, because we only had like literally the only pathway that was financially supported and celebrated was the social business plan competition, right? So in order to get funding and support out of the MBA to go do some social impact work, the only pathway within that social impact frame was this, you had to pitch your solution. And why is your solution better than theirs, right? There is no entrepreneur who changes the system. It doesn't exist. Tell me the entrepreneur who changed, marriage laws and the views and models around marriage in America, right? Tell me the entrepreneur who changed, in a negative way, the fact that we have the most incarcerated people in the world, and it's racially biased in the state. Right? There's things that happened. We made a jail system that's for profit, right? There's things that happen, but there's not one entrepreneur who created that systems change in a good way or in a bad way, or however, you know what I mean? There's lots of contributions. You could say you could say Citizens United in America, where we gave the right for corporates to fund politics, is had a huge impact on lots of systems. Yeah, it did. And it's one of so many other things, right? So as we look at these, Daniela Meadows, a famous systems educator, taught at Dartmouth, studied I think under Jay Forrester at MIT, wrote a lot of books. She talks about leverage change, or she talked about She passed away since. Leverage points. Leverage. There's an article you can search, Daniela Papi-Thornton's leverage and points in a system. And she talks about depth of the leverage points. And what she means by that is policy change. That's hard to do. It's hard to change policy. It takes a long time, right? But actually, it's pretty shallow in the sense that if you do have some sort of two-party system, guess what? In 4 years or whenever your voting cycle is, it might get changed back, even though it took a long time to do that, right? As you go down, like the mental models and the paradigms that we have, right? If we all, what I would say to my students, if the entire world cared as much about whatever issue it is that you cared about, if everybody cared about it, you wouldn't have to worry about changing any of these other things because the policies would all be changed because the policymakers have the same view as you. The voters have the same view as you. The corporate leadership has the same view as you. So everyone would have, if they all had that mental model, they would work towards this. Now, mental models really freaking hard to change, right? So let's say there's an issue you care about. You might want to work at that deep level and you're making documentary films and you're doing teaching or you're being a journalist, whatever. You're like trying to shape mental models. You're doing cross communication across polarity, whatever it is that you're doing. And this is long-term deep work, or you're like, I don't have time to wait 20 years. I want to work on this policy change. There's not one right answer here, right? There's not one, but there's leverage points, depths of leverage points. And every time I read this, because I've taught it in classes, I would kind of always skip over Daniela Papi-Thornton's like deepest leverage point because I'm like, I don't really understand what she's saying. It's very confusing. But now I feel like I have a better sense of it, where she says like one is changing paradigms, like mental models, like the way that we operate. The deepest one, she says, is, I'm going to get the wording wrong, but it's something like the ability to even recognize paradigms, like the ability to understand that you can change them, right? To recognize that it is a paradigm, right? The whole idea of a fish in water being like, what's water, right? Because it's in water, right? So, and now I see that and understand it so much more because I can see in myself, in my life, in the people that I work with. I do a lot of coaching. When people don't see that they have this limiting belief, right? It's hard to change that mental model. But once you can see it, it's still hard to change it. It's still hard to change it, right? Like a belief that it's a belief that I'm not good enough, or, getting ahead requires like working really hard and pushing and like, what if there's other ways, to like succeed in whatever these things are, these mental models that hold us back individually. Once you have and can change one on the collective level or an individual level, I mean, it's only changed on the individual level, right? And it ripples out. Then you realize that all this other stuff is paradigms. Like I made it all up. Like we made up the education system. There is no rule that says kids need to go through K through 12. Like in Finland, like, don't they not learn to like read and do academics till like age 8? Our 5-year-olds are sitting in like chairs learning how to read. They're learning the word. My kid's in kindergarten right now. It's learning how to read things. There's no comprehension, right? There's no right way here. We feel like there's a righteousness. Well, this way is better. That way is better. I believe in Waldorf. I believe in this kind of education. There's nuance, there's complexity, and we made it all up, right? And once you realize you made it all up, your internal mental models, our collective mental models, the idea of boundaries in a country, it's all made up. There does not exist, right? Then you can start to envision, it's like, oh, if we made it up, we can make up something different. Yeah.
That's beautiful, Daniela. And I wish we had 5 more hours because I have a billion questions. But my last question is this. If someone is going to facilitate system change education, what are some pieces of advice you would have for this person?
Okay. So in 2013, I started a little Google group called Social Impact Educators. And over the years, we had different gatherings, and mostly it was about innovation education. So social entrepreneurship, social innovation education. So social innovation education. and how those of us who are saying we need to bring systems pieces in, right? So in 2013, the conversation around systems was nascent. It existed a lot, but not necessarily in the social innovation education space very much, right? Fast forward, 12 years later, that conversation is there. Like, the idea of systems education in these spaces, it's there, right? And so we're looking at what does it look like to cross-pollinate these humans who care about systems change education, no matter which of these definitions you have, right? If your definition is to teach systems understanding, skill sets, and mindset, if your definition is to be a catalyst for change within your educational institution, right? It just was on a call with a guy who is, I think he's at University of Maryland, and helped create this idea that every single student can now teach a class and get credit for teaching it, and students can take their classes. So they teach like things like Minecraft 101 or like how to do Instagram, but they're just teaching interesting, super cool stuff. And then students get to take classes. But what that does is not only change the role of educator, it changes the system in some ways, because the educators get to see how the students teach. And it's such a different way of engaging. And they then become better educators by seeing how do these students want to learn, right? It's like these little things that are like innovations within the system, right? Or if your work is to be it, right? And some people like, I want to do all three of these, great. My hope is that if we can cross-pollinate these humans so that they can learn from each other, most of them are the type of people who they are working because they care about the future of education. They care about the future of our world. They're happy to share their curricula. They're happy to like brainstorm your course that you're going to do. They were happy to cross-pollinate, right? But they need to find each other, right? So we just started, it's called Systems Change Educators Unite.com. And the hope is to launch this in a much more formal way in end of November as a community that has drop-in peer mentor coaching together. Just drop in. Other educators will help you. Topic conversations, different workshops that we can record, different gatherings, so that cross-pollination can happen more easily. And I want to share one story that came out. I heard this from Olga. Last name I'm forgetting right now. She helps run the Globalizer program at Ashoka. And she talks about this group of students in Portugal. And she is talking about how the students were doing something kind of like Map the System, which is they pick a topic and they spend the semester researching it, right? So many students pick these big topics like environment and health and different things. And there's a group of students who liked golf, right? And so they pick golf, right? And so other students are looking down on them like, oh, they picked this, this thing, golf, this shallow topic. Well, they start to research this, and they find out that watering golf courses takes about 10% of the country's drinking water. And they get super interested in this, and they decide to do this research project. And a part of the research project is they create these Zoom calls where they invite the people who manage every single golf course in Portugal, but they also invite global experts on greening golf courses. Like, how do you make them more environmentally friendly? Those students might have had a bigger impact on water use in the country than nonprofits, right? Huge nonprofits with big budgets trying to reduce water, because what they did is they reduced the distance in the system. They took these decision makers and put them on the same Zoom call with these experts and connected them to each other, right? And shared techniques and ideas, and then connected them to see what could come out of that, right? The answer to that is, like, no matter what role you currently play as an educator, as a student, as a, someone who has never even stepped into a certain system, but you care about it and you're like, I want to find my way in. The number one indicator of you being able to do that is you caring and then saying, I'm going to find a way to contribute. Like, those students are such an example. You don't have to have a ton of resources. You don't have to have a ton of connections, but your commitment to finding a path to contributing is all you need. And you will find one, right? You will find one. And that's my hope, is that we can all find our ways to do that in these times, because that's what we need. People. contributing to shifting our system.
Oh my goodness, Daniela, I'm also part of the community there. I can't wait to get to meet other folks and to cross-pollinate ideas. And thank you for ending with that note, because like finding that strength, that determination, finding that spark does feel like it's a journey, and a journey very much worth taking and very much important for us right now. Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, your wisdom. Friends, Daniela Papi-Thornton, please follow her. You have all the links and all the things here in the episode descriptions. You can find her on LinkedIn and so many other places. So thank you for being here. And if this episode it was meaningful to you, feel free to share with anyone and rate our podcast just so that more people see it. Thank you so much, and see you next time.
Thanks for having me.